Good morning. My name is Donna Marie Collins. I'm the hearing examiner that will be presiding over this morning's application, which is pertaining to the Pelican Landing MPD. The date is June 19th, 2025. I have received the 48-hour letter. I am marking that as applicant Exhibit 1. All testimony and evidence I accept during these hearings must be taken in under oath. I will administer the oath at the conclusion of my introductory comments. Quick question, do we have any members of the public here today? No. Okay, well then I will abbreviate my introduction since we have seasoned veterans here, and I will request the affidavit of publication for the hearing. Are we sure this was advertised? I'm a little suspicious because we have no public.
It was advertised, and I have received 120 emails.
All right then. Well, you must have satisfied them with your community meetings if they're not here today. Okay, I will accept the affidavit of publication. This will be Staff Exhibit 4. I will note that Staff Exhibit 1 is the staff report. Staff report, condition number 2, excuse me, Exhibit number 2 is the staff report that was provided on the remand. And then exhibit number 3 is the DRI related staff report, and this will be exhibit 4, affidavit of publication. Okay. I'm ready to begin. I was so busy grabbing my drink, I forgot my legal pad.
Good morning. For the record, Rich Ivanovich on behalf of the applicant. With me today are Stephen Wilson and Lisa Van Deen. With the applicant, you'll hear from Mr. Wilson, who is with London Bay. Jackie LaRoque is our civil engineer on the project. Ted Treesh is our transportation consultant. Shane Johnson is our environmental consultant. And both Jim France and Alexis Crespo are our professional planners. They've all been qualified as experts before you in the past, so we would request that they be accepted as experts in their respective fields. The application before you today, it's actually, you have two, but I don't think you actually hear the DRI portion of that today, but you have an application to rezone 430 acres to a PD, mixed PD. It's at the terminus of Coconut Road. It's on the north side of Coconut Road, and it's outlined in red for you. The property is owned by the applicant today, so the acquisition of property is not conditioned upon any rezoning activity for the property. Overall, the property is 430 acres. It's currently zoned the Kersey Smoot RPD and the Pelican Landing CPD RPD, and again, we're requesting it be rezoned to the Pelican Landing MPD. I expected there to be some public here today, but this is part of the Pelican Landing DRI. As you know, the Pelican Landing has several PDs within it, and we're rezoning portions of 2 of those PDs to the Pelican Landing MPD. I'm going to outline, and you'll hear in greater detail, this rezone to MPD modifies density that was originally allocated in the PD and some intensity for retail and office and hotel. So there are additions and subtractions from the current PDs in the DRI. However, at the end of the day, you'll hear from Ted Treesh that, and your staff agreed, that the modifications actually result in a reduction in trips generated from the PD, and specifically Coconut Road does operate at the adopted level of service with all of the additions and subtractions from the PD that you will hear about. And you will see from the, I believe staff will give you all of the emails that were received and the primary concerns seem to have to do with traffic on Coconut Road. So we'll be providing you with testimony as to the impacts of what we're proposing, not only within the DRI, but also specifically on Coconut Road.
Okay, regarding the DRI, the code requires me to review the requested amendment
Right.
and prepare a recommendation to the board. My review is very
Right.
narrow in scope. I will be doing that as
Yes.
part of this request,
You will
correct?
be. That's a companion, and you've already received those. That's why we had the continuance, if you remember.
Okay,
was
right.
Because we didn't have the DRI materials.
I just wanted to clarify that we were handling both matters.
Yes, yes. So there is the companion DRI, that your amendment to the DRI that you will also be considering. As I started to talk about, we are increasing the overall number of dwelling units in the DRI by 488 dwelling units. We are reducing the overall retail by 147,000 square feet. We are reducing the office by a little over 100,000 square feet. We're removing one golf hole, and we are adding 232 rooms. As Mr. Treesh will tell you in his analysis, that actually is a reduction in the overall traffic for the DRI, and therefore the PD is not creating any additional traffic impacts other than what was previously approved in the DRI. And again, as I mentioned, we did a specific analysis, although I don't believe it was legally required. We did do a specific analysis on Coconut Road. I'm going to turn it over to Stephen Wilson to give you just a brief introduction to London Bay. They are property owners in both Lee County as well as Bonita Springs, and are committed to this portion of Lee County as a developer. They do nothing but high-end, first-class development, and I'll have Stephen give you a brief introduction of London Bay, and then Jim will come up, Jim France will come up and start the planning presentation, and then we'll move through the other experts with our presentation.
Will the golf course be open to the public?
The golf course currently is open to the public, but there is the possibility that the golf course could go private.
So the traffic was analyzed based on public access to the
Correct.
golf
Yes.
course? Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name's Stephen Wilson. I'm one of the owners and Executive Vice President of London Bay. Just wanted to give you a very brief overview of who we are and what we do. We're established in 1990 in Fort Myers, been going for 35 years. Most of our work is in Collier and Lee County. We've had a very good reputation for what we do, including being called America's best builder at some stage. We see this as a real legacy project. It's over 500 acres, including land in Lee County and in Bonita. See it as being absolutely world-class residential space. You've got an image of our first phase up on the screen. And we see it as being very complementary to Lee County and Estero and Bonita Springs, and very much see that as being combined with the core values of how we operate as a company. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rumors of our influence are greatly exaggerated, so let's see where we get with this request to stifle the electronic equipment there.
Good morning, Jem France with RBI Planning and Landscape Architecture. Going to run through our request. So, taking a step back to looking at the project location, there's been changes to jurisdictional boundaries in this area over time. So what you're looking at now demonstrates the portion of the property and a couple of surrounding properties that are within unincorporated Lee County. And then that's surrounded by the village of Estero, which is yellow, and the city of Bonita Springs, which is blue.
Okay, so this application pertains solely to the outline in red.
Correct.
The property in the Bonita Springs, is that part of London Bay's property as well?
London Bay does own some of the properties over here, and they're within the city of Bonita Springs. They have their own PDs in that
This is
jurisdiction.
freestanding, going to meet all the criteria on its own.
Did I break it?
No.
Oh, I thought.
So looking at the surrounding lands, kind of in the donut hole here is the Hyatt timeshares. This was a part of the Kersey Smoot PD. We'll see that in a future slide.
And that's out.
That's not within the property. This single-family residential over here is the Fountain Lakes community. To the north is the West Bay Golf and Country Club. This property here, one of the London Bay owned properties, is known as Raptor Bay. To the south of that, the Ritz residences. You may have seen that those towers going up. Again, to the south of the Ritz is the Hyatt Coconut Point. To the south of Coconut Road is the Colony, which is made up by a number of smaller communities. And then our neighbor to the southeast is El Dorado Acres. Within the property, there are 3 separate land use categories. Suburban is over here, currently a golf course area. There's wetlands throughout the property, running north and south, and then along the western boundary, and then the remainder is outlying suburban. So the calculation of that acreage, and actually this acreage here includes the Kersey Smoot acreage as well. And we'll get to why we're including both of those in a future slide. But so including that Kersey Smoot donut hole, the calculation of allowable density in those future land use designations is 893 dwelling units. That doesn't include any density derived from any of the non-residential areas. And you can see the breakdown of the wetlands as well. So here you can see the current zoning. The Kersey Smoot PD is the blue. You can see that portions of it have been annexed into the city of Bonita Springs and are included in those separate PDs. And the red is the Pelican Landing CPD RPD. These areas over here are colored as if they're within the PDs. This boundary line here represents the mean high water line. So this is kind of a remnant of, a mapping remnant that is not really a part of the property. So just trying to make that part clear. Here's the current Kersey Smoot RPD. You can see how at the clubhouse it cuts to the west. So when we're looking at that, you can see that some of those properties have been annexed into the city, and again down here as well. So Kersey Smoot was accessed by what is now known as Salt Leaf Boulevard, Coconut Point Resort. It's a private road. Included a golf clubhouse, the Hyatt timeshares, and some additional sales centers to the south. It allowed for 362 multifamily units. 96 of those are currently built. The maximum building height in that PD is 75 feet. And so of the 362 total units allowed within Kersey Smoot, 241 of those units are now owned by the applicant today and have been assigned to the Pelican Landing MPD as we move forward.
So they're unbuilt, but assigned to this MP, available for development under this MPD.
Correct. So that leaves the Kersey-Smoot PD with 121 units remaining. So 96 of those are built. There's an additional 25 units.
Okay, so when you say 121 units remain within Kersey-Smoot, is that then outside this project?
Outside of this project.
In Lee County or Bonita Springs, but not part of this?
In Lee County, but not part of this.
Okay.
This is the current master concept plan for the Pelican Landing portion of the property. It's currently entitled for the existing golf course that's there. There's ancillary amenities and preservation lands as well.
And is this developed?
This is developed. The golf course is open and exists today. So this is all just a part of the Pelican Landing DRI, as you know, as Rich mentioned. It's within the overall DRI, and that DRI straddles Lee County, City of Bonita Springs, and the Village of Estero. The DRI is made up of just two separate development orders, one in Bonita Springs and one in Lee County. That Bonita Springs covers all of the remaining lands outside of unincorporated Lee County. There's been quite a few amendments over time, 16 previous amendments to the DRI. As we've mentioned, we have a companion DRI DO amendment to address the density changes that we're proposing through this MPD. And the majority of the rest of the DRI outside of the subject property today is already built out.
Can you hear? Yeah.
So looking at the entitlements within the DRI, stepping away from today's PD, the total approved residential units are 3,912. Of that, the total unbuilt entitlements for residential units, that's the 241 units from Kersey-Smoot that I mentioned just a couple slides ago.
And that's going to be assigned to the MPD?
Will be assigned to the MPD today. And then I won't run through all the numbers. You can see those. You have the presentation. But essentially, the column here is the overall approvals, and the column to the right demonstrates what has been transferred to the applicant today. So in addition to those 241 units from Kersey-Smoot, they've also obtained some retail and office square footage as well. And that square footage is a part of what?
Converted to other uses. I got that.
Again, going back through the request overview today, so for the MPD itself, the total dwelling units is 729 dwelling units. You'll see in the traffic report that assumes 100 single-family units and 629 multifamily dwellings. The PD will retain 25,000 square feet of office uses. Again, 27 golf holes and 318 hotel rooms. There's also private on-site recreation and accessory uses as well. The building heights vary based on the different tracts within the MPD, which we'll run through really explicitly, but we have the highest heights of 290 feet are more towards the west, and they step down as we go further to the east. So 290, 110, and 50 feet.
Oh, wait, go back?
Sure.
So these represent caps, right?
Exactly.
What's MU?
Yeah, so we'll see on the master concept plan, we've got several tracks for development. The MU is the mixed use tract, and that's where we have the ability for those office uses.
Retail office.
Just office uses.
Okay.
I'll try not to get too in the weeds on this table, but again, we're looking at the overall approved DRI entitlements. This is, again, the same column that we saw on the previous slide, compared to the total proposed entitlements in the MPD, and what that represents in terms of increases or decreases in the DRI.
So the reduction in office and retail is allowing you to increase the residential and the hotel, but still keep the traffic below the original estimate?
Exactly. And we'll continue to look at that throughout the presentation. As we're looking at these numbers, so this 729 includes the 241 dwelling units, and so that's why it is only an increase of 488 units for the overall DRI approvals. I mentioned that the future land use designation table included the remnant portion of Kersey Smoot, that kind of like donut hole. And so this is why we included that in that calculation, because we wanted, as we're taking some lands out of Kersey Smoot, moving them into this Pelican Landing MPD, wanted to ensure that both this entire area was still consistent with the Lee plan in terms of allowable density. And so, again, you see this is that same table from before, a maximum of 893 allowable dwelling units. And between the proposed Pelican Landing MPD, today's subject property, 729 dwelling units, and the remaining 121 dwelling units that we went through, it's only a maximum of 850 units. So well within the allowable dwelling units in both of these areas. Here's the master concept plan. Here's where some of the heights and the tracks will make more sense. So overall, you've got the MU tract, the mixed-use tract, adjacent to Coconut Road. We have a res tract. That's the 110-foot building height that you saw previously. And then the MF tract up here. The remainder is a mix of golf course, stormwater lakes, and conservation areas. This blue through here is an existing flowway. These preserve areas are all under existing conservation easements.
So does this mixed-use area include what, it's like a parking facility right now, or is that on another
The parking
parcel?
facility is off-site next door.
I see, okay.
This was previously all golf course, and the golf course has been redeveloped over the last couple of years. There's been a couple of ADDs to allow for that, and this area is no longer being used for golf.
Well, I'm gonna have to do another site check after this hearing, because it was difficult to put things into context just looking at the paperwork when I went out
Sure.
prior to hearing.
As you're driving down Coconut Road, this access point right here is the existing access point for the golf maintenance facility.
Right. Okay.
Just to orient you a little.
All right, thank you.
So access for the overall master concept plan includes that access point on Coconut Road. Also along Saltleaf Boulevard, there are access points into the res and then into the MF tract. We also anticipate some interconnections with the surrounding Raptor Bay PD in Bonita Springs. We're going to go through some more elements of the master concept plan in the next few slides. So we looked at the proposed building heights in comparison to some of the building heights surrounding the property. I'll walk through. So West Bay has a maximum of 290 feet, which is the same as our MF tract. Raptor Bay, that piece adjacent to us, has a maximum of 20 stories over 2 parking. The Ritz Residences has a maximum of 286 feet. Hyatt Coconut Point, 213. Altera, 249, and Navona, 254. So on our property within these tracts, you can see the 290, 110, and 50.
Where are the single-family homes going to go?
So those will be allowed in the mixed use tract.
I see. Thank you.
The buffers for the property, there's a combination here. So where there are preserves adjacent to surrounding properties, there's no buffer proposed. Where the golf course is adjacent to El Dorado and West Bay, we have a 30-foot type F. Those buffers are in place now. They were required as part of the golf course redevelopment. There's a maintenance road that runs along here, and so that type F was required for that maintenance road. We have type D buffers along rights of way, along the private road here, and then along Coconut Road. And then as a part of the staff conditions, we have a modified type B buffer adjacent between the mixed use tract and the El Dorado acres. Oh, sorry, couple more things to point out here. I mentioned this is an existing flowway, so we have a 50-foot waterway buffer on both sides of that flowway. And then we have preserves that vary in width along the western side of the property that provide a buffer to the Estero Bay. In terms of open space, there are 65 acres required for the property, 204 acres provided. And again, I mentioned the preserves that are demonstrated on the map today are under an existing conservation easement. We have a number of deviations that I'll walk through for the PD. Many of these have been previously approved for different PDs and ADDs and along the way, so I'll point those out when that's relevant. Deviation 1 allows for 5-foot sidewalks along one side of internal roadways. This applies to all of the different tracks. So we're just looking for flexibility in site design, and it's consistent also with adjacent approvals in Bonita Springs. Deviation 2 applies again to most of the tracks, Res, MF, and MU tracks, and allows for individual parking spaces to back onto the right-of-way to allow for on-street parking. This is one that has been approved in the past for those two zoning resolutions. Deviation 3 allows for 0-foot separation between internal roads and drives from the development perimeter, and a 15-foot separation when adjacent to external parcels. Again, looking for flexibility in site design and keeping the internal parcels a mixed-use environment, walkable and things like that. This has previously been approved as well. Deviation 4 allows for a 0-foot setback for identification signs when site distance requirements are met. And again, this is another that was approved previously and allows for consistent signage throughout the development. Deviation 5, again, allows a 0-foot, I think this one is wrong.
It looks like a repeat.
Yeah, I'm gonna come back to that. Apologize for that. I'm gonna come back to that slide to the end. Deviation 6 allows for 4-to-1 slope on all lake banks in all tracks. That's currently been approved for the golf course area, and we're expanding that to the remainder of the tracks within the PD. Deviation 7 allows for a 5% reduction of the required spaces at the golf clubhouse only. This was previously requested for a reduction in unnecessary parking and approved in a past zoning resolution. Deviation 8 is addressing those maximum heights. The maximum height of 290 feet was previously approved in zoning resolution 94-014. Deviation 9 allows for no internal buffers between tracks. It allows for, again, addressing that mixed-use walkability environment that we're looking for. This applies to all tracks. Deviation 10 allows for the indoor recreation facilities to be parked at one space per 1,000 square feet for those private facilities, where those facilities aren't open to the public and just to the residences. It's intended to reduce the parking that would be required. Some of these facilities will be located within towers, and so obviously don't require trips to get there for the residents. Deviation 11 allows a 0-foot setback when adjacent to other tracks within the Pelican Landing MPD. Adjacent to the Pelican Landing RPD, CPD in Bonita, and the Bayview CPD in Bonita as well, and a 50-foot setback from the northern property boundary. In this case, we're in agreement with staff's recommended changes to this deviation. Deviation 12 allows for a minimum separation of buildings of 35% of the sum of the buildings for buildings that are greater than 35 feet in height. This allows for some flexibility in the design of those towers. And we have a letter of no objection from the Estero Fire Department provided as a part of your 48-hour notice. Deviation 13 allows for no perimeter buffers where on-site preserve areas abut the MPD perimeter. And we saw that in the master concept plan when we were looking at the buffers. Again, staff recommendation has a condition associated with this deviation, and we're in agreement. Deviation 14 allows for a connection separation of 215 feet on Coconut Road, so that is where that existing access point is for the golf maintenance building and the access point for the adjacent property. Those access points already exist and just want to maintain those. This access also aligns with access to the south, and so makes sense to keep that access in that location. With that, I want to go back to deviation number 5. So deviation 5 allows for recreation centers and ancillary facilities to be located at least 40 feet from residential dwelling units, and instead allows for a minimum of 20 feet for the internal parcels, but not for parcels that are adjacent to the property boundary. So again, consistent with some of those other deviations, looking for internal buffers, separations to be reduced. And that is one that was also previously approved. With that, I'll turn it over to Shane Johnson for our environmental analysis.
Hello, good morning. Shane Johnson, Passerella and Associates, here to very briefly outline the environmental aspects of the project. I think staff did a great job including the environmental information in the staff reports, and Jem included some of this information already in the previous presentation, so I won't belabor this information here. So with respect to the conservation easements, again, Jem outlined that. Here's the larger tract that belongs to Eco Park, and the upside down U-shape, which is dedicated to the South Florida Water Management District. Just showing here that the majority of the wetlands, about 98%, are contained within the existing conservation easements, and the easement total between the two is approximately 204 acres. The blue areas outline the surface waters, which are essentially the golf course ponds. I do want to point out that the limits of those were mapped originally as part of the golf course renovation project, which was the renovation of the golf course pretty much east of this conservation easement limit. So it was older line work, and after the renovation was completed, there was some reconfiguration of some of the lakes you can see here, and some new ponds on the eastern side of the property. So just wanted to point that out. We use our older mapping to be consistent with the record, the previous reports that were submitted.
So it seems that these open space and preserve areas are going to remain intact, and the golf course is going to remain intact. Is that correct?
Golf course, yes.
Okay.
Again, the renovation was just completed.
Right, that's.
So,
internal.
yeah.
So primarily, the development entitlements that are sought pertain to this area to the northwest and then down below.
Looking to the team, I think the answer is yes.
Yeah. I asked only that, I'm not gonna have to, when I go back, I'm not gonna have to try to get into the weeds of the east side. It seems as though that's pretty established already.
It's pretty back here, though, so,
Yeah, well, if they'll let me through.
yeah. Okay, so with respect to listed species, Passarella and Associates conducted multiple species on the project site from June 2020 through July 2023, and the results of those surveys are included as part of Attachment X to the staff report and are also summarized on this slide. So the results of the survey, we identified American alligator usage adjacent to the wetland area, bald eagle nest in the northern portion of the conservation easement area. There was a separate bald eagle management plan prepared specifically for this nest that's also included as part of Attachment X. And just to point out, the buffer zones of this nest are completely contained within the conservation area, so no issues there. Also, gopher tortoises, I'll touch more on this on the next slide, but there were 3 gopher tortoises observed on the property, but 424 burrows observed on the property. Again, I'll touch on that. Also, some wading bird usage, little blue herons and snowy egrets, and I believe that's it as far as listed species goes. So again, a little bit more information on the tortoises. So all these dots represent burrows. Many of the burrows are contained within the existing conservation areas, which are highlighted in gray there. So those remained in place. But there was a separate permit obtained from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission to excavate and relocate all these white dots, the tortoise burrows within the development footprint. So that work was completed.
That's already happened.
That's already completed, yes.
So they were moved off-site somewhere, or were they moved north of the site?
They were excavated and removed and placed in an approved off-site recipient area
Okay.
in accordance with the FWC permit. So, knowing that we have 204 acres of conservation area, which, by the way, I forgot to mention, all the initial work associated with the mitigation in those conservation areas has been completed. It's essentially in the maintenance phase. So since there's conservation area on site and listed species utilization, there was an indigenous preserve and protected species management plan prepared, again, also attached as part of it, included as Attachment X. So the details of the preserve maintenance and species management are included in that plan. For future development order applications, that plan may need to be updated and submitted. The applicant is aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So in conclusion, it's my professional opinion that the Pelican Landing MPD has met all the applicable standards and demonstrated consistency with the lead plan and the LDC.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I'm just going to take a break for a quick second to find out. I know some people came into the room during testimony. Are these part of your consulting team, or are these members of the public?
Members of the public.
Okay, so I just want to briefly explain this proceeding in case you're not familiar with it. The applicant representing the property owner making the request makes the presentation first. Their presentation normally consists of several witnesses with various areas of expertise. At the conclusion and during their presentation, I may have several questions. Once they've completed their presentation, we will go to the county planner who prepared the staff report in this case. The staff report is a recommendation of approval. The planner will go through the county's analysis of the case, not repeating everything that the applicant already said, but focusing on highlights and perhaps special conditions that may have been recommended. And then at the conclusion of their presentation, I will open up the proceeding to members of the public. And at that time, you may come to the podium. You don't have to speak, but if you wish to speak, you can come to the podium. You can ask any question you want to ask. We will note all your questions, and then at the conclusion of all public input, we'll go back to the parties and they will proceed to address any questions that were raised or clarify any issues that may not have been clear to members of the public. You may speak as long as you'd like, but you only get one opportunity at the podium. And at the conclusion of the rebuttal, then there may be some closing remarks by the parties, and then we will close the hearing. The decision is not final today with me. I prepare a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, who are the final decision makers. If you would like an opportunity to address the commission at the final hearing, you must put remarks on the record during this hearing. So with that, I'm going to administer the oath to everyone in the room, because I know you were not present when we first started, and I'm not sure whether I did it in the beginning. So I would ask you, if you're going to be speaking on the record, to please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony and evidence you place into the record will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. One last thing for members of the public. We have sheets against the wall. They're public participation forms. Whether you intend to speak or not, if you fill them out and provide your email address, you will receive a copy of my recommendation in this case, and also further notification of the final board hearing where the decision will actually be made. So I urge you to do that maybe during a break or something this morning, and then just put it in the bin over here at my table. Okay, I'm ready for your next witness.
Good morning, Jackie LaRock, Senior Director of Atwell. I'm going to talk to you today about public facilities and stormwater management. So with the Pelican Landing MPD, there is currently existing water and sewer along Coconut Road and along Saltleaf Boulevard. We've worked very closely with Bonita Springs Utilities to verify capacity, make sure that the plans that London Bay has, the infrastructure is there to serve it. Fire and EMS, we're 2.5 miles from Station 42. And again, London Bay has worked very closely with the fire department, and so the capacity is there. So with that, for water, sewer, public infrastructure, the capacity for the plans that have been presented to you today, the infrastructure is there. As far as water management, this is a nice one because we already have our ERP. So we submitted a water management permit in 2022 for the proposed changes that London Bay is looking to make on the property. That permit was issued in October of 2023. Since then, we've gone through countless reviews with the district, and the location of this project is such that it's Anastero Bay, impaired water bodies. So water quality, nutrient removal, those are the key things that we have to look at, and those are the key concerns. And so with this project, 150% water quality treatment has been provided. We've done a very in-depth nutrient loading study for nitrogen and phosphorus removal. We've met with the district, we've gone through everything, and since then they've approved that. And for the project, the east side of the project discharges into the slough system, which ultimately goes to Estero Bay. The west side of the project discharges directly to Estero Bay. The water management system is set up in such where it's perimeter bermed. The runoff for the project stays on the project, gets treated within the ponds that are created, interconnected, control structured, and then the treated water gets discharged through a series of control structures at a controlled rate. And so let me see, like I said, we've gone through the review. The design meets all of the local Lee County criteria, the state criteria. We have the water management permit in hand, and it is my professional opinion that the changes that they're making to this project will have no adverse impacts to the neighboring properties or the environment.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Good morning, Ted Shreesh with TR Transportation Consultants. We prepared the traffic analysis in support of this application. That's part of the record and been reviewed by staff. There's also, I believe, attachment V in the staff report is the memo from Lily Wu, the review of the transportation analysis. So this slide is just a summary of the change in the uses that was analyzed as part of the overall Pelican Landing DRI that we went through, that shows the change in the uses that we analyzed to show the net decrease in the trip generation to allow the increase in the residential units that's shown on the first line of the 488 dwelling units. The second line is the decrease in the retail uses, and the second line is third line is the decrease of the office uses. Because those uses were concentrated more towards the US 41 corridor, as you saw on the master concept plan, these uses are more towards the west that utilize more the Coconut Road corridor. We went a little bit further and looked at the impacts on Coconut Road. Since London Bay, I've been working with London Bay for a number of years. We worked on the Bonita Springs project at the end of Coconut Road in that case, and traffic on Coconut Road is always a concern. That case was in the city of Bonita Springs. Coconut Road is under a multitude of jurisdictions. The majority of the Coconut Road is under the Village of Estero jurisdiction. There is a short segment that's under the Lee County jurisdiction. So it has a multitude of jurisdictions. So London Bay was very concerned, and so we looked at the impacts to Coconut Road in furtherance in our analysis. This table just shows specific to this MPD, the impacts are the uses that are concentrated on the MPD in our section to the west on this property that we analyzed in our analysis. This table shows in the overall DRI the reduction in the trips. So for the overall DRI, we're consistent. And again, this DRI goes back a number of years. There was a significant transportation mitigation that was paid as part of the DRI. That's all been paid, and those mitigation impacts have been taken care of in terms of off-site transportation
So no
improvements.
impact fees
No.
will be associated with this request? It was addressed as part of the DRI mitigation?
Well, we will be paying impact fees for the uses, but there's no additional off-site impacts that are being.
see.
Yes. But we will be paying impact fees as we do normally at the building permit stage. So this final slide was our specific analysis that looked at the Coconut Road impacts. And what this looked at specifically, because Coconut Road is under the jurisdiction of the Village of Estero, the Village of Estero collects traffic data on Coconut Road. We started with that. We grew the traffic volumes up to 2028. We looked at a number of different projects. We looked at the Bayview on Estero Bay, which I was personally involved with. That's a London Bay project that's currently under construction. Those are the two towers that are under construction right now that you'll see. The Woodfield project was recently approved by the Village of Estero. That's the mixed-use project right at the corner of US 41 on the northwest corner. That's a significant project that will be under development in the coming years. At that intersection, we looked at the London Bay MPD as well. And then we analyzed the impacts on Coconut Road, and you can see from this table that it will still operate at a level service D in 2028.
And
Not
is
only,
that the projected build-out, 2028?
yes,
Okay.
that's what we started with. Again, we've been working on this for going on 2 years now.
I was going to
so.
say, that's ambitious. It's a lot of
Yes.
development to get done,
When we started in 2023, so.
but we digress.
So again, and our analysis shows that we're consistent with the goals and objectives of the Land Development Code and the LEAP plan, and staff agrees with our analysis, and that's all I have to put on the record. I'd be more than happy to. Oh, yep, one thing, I did have that note. Sorry, Rich, he brought that. I even have it written down here, and I just skipped right over it. One of the things that also this project participated in was the funding of a traffic signal at US 41 and Pelican Colony Boulevard. Pelican Colony Boulevard is the intersection just south of Coconut Road and US 41. The DRI, which we are part of, has funded the construction of a traffic signal at that intersection. Right now, it's an unsignalized full median opening.
Where is this?
It's about 2,000 feet south of Coconut Road.
Okay,
The Lee Health Facility is on the east side.
yes.
If we can go to the aerial, do we have an aerial photo?
Yeah.
Right here. So Coconut Road, just off the aerial to the north. Here's
I
the
see.
here's the Lee Health Center
Yeah.
facility. Here's the main Pelican Colony Boulevard is the main spine road going into the Pelican Colony development. So if anybody from Pelican Colony wants to head north on US 41, this is an unsignalized intersection, so it's very difficult to turn left out of here during any time of the day, really. So either you go to Coconut Road, you come out Spring Creek which is further to the west, or you can come out this road here, or you can come out through this intersection here. This intersection will be turned into a roundabout as part of this Woodfield. This is the Woodfield project. So this will be converted to a roundabout intersection as part of that development. And you can make a left at the signalized intersection at Coconut Road. This intersection will be signalized. It's right now in the permitting stages with FDOT. It's been designed. It's right now just going through the final design review with FDOT. So
what's the timing on that?
it should have been constructed by now. They're just going back and forth right now with DOT on the final aspects of the design. There's been some going back and forth with DOT, from what I understand, with the consultant that's designing the signal. So once I get those worked out, then it'll go to the contractor for bid, and hopefully I would say by the end of next year, it should be operational.
So did the transportation analysis on the impact on Coconut Road take into account that less traffic or DRI traffic would be using Coconut Road because now there's a signal further in, or
No.
did you just base it on existing volume?
We just based it on the existing, yes. I mean, once that signal's there, folks that are now using this will be diverted to this signal and have that option.
All right, and I just want this on the record because intuitively it's hard to get your head around the increases that are proposed and the fact that traffic is going down. Is it correct in saying that retail commercial and office commercial are big peak hour generators, whereas hotel, not so much?
Correct. Hotels more spread throughout the day, whereas residential and retail and commercial, yes, are more peak hour driven, whereas a hotel is more spread throughout the day.
So less impacts during peak hours with this change?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
As we're getting the PowerPoint pulled back up, I want to go back and correct a statement that I made.
Jim France. Right.
Thank you.
Okay, am I going to be getting the PowerPoint as an exhibit?
That was my next thing.
Okay.
Yes. So I'll give that to you now. The PowerPoint and our copy of the DRI map H and the master concept plan are in there, as well as a hard copy of the 48-hour letter.
Okay, this will be applicant composite exhibit 2. Okay, so it's the PowerPoint. It's the master concept plan,
And the DRI map H.
master plan of development, DRI, map H. Okay. Okay, thank you.
In response to your question about the location of single-family development, I had stated that it was located in the mixed-use tract. The PD does allow for a single-family in each of the multifamily, the res, and the mixed-use tract. It's intended to be located in the mixed-use tract, but it is allowed in the other tracts as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, gonna walk through Lee Plan and Land Development Code compliance now. The first set of policies identify densities within those future land use categories, and again, looking at that same table that we've looked at a couple of times in the past, we've demonstrated consistency with the maximum densities in each of those future land use categories, and as I mentioned before, no density has been derived from the non-residential areas of the PD. Objectives 2.1 and 2.2 require contiguous and compact growth patterns. This is an area that's readily served by public infrastructure, and it's contiguous to a lot of existing and emerging development in the area. Standards 4.1.1 and 4.1.2 require connection to Lee County Utilities for water and sewer service. We do have a letter of availability for potable water and sanitary sewer. Goal 5 is related to residential land uses. Policy 5.1.2 prohibits residential density where physical constraints and hazards exist. Policy 5.1.5 protects existing future residential areas. So for these policies, we've walked through some enhanced buffering for the adjacent residential areas. We're, again, readily serviced by public infrastructure, and we have a letter of availability. The surrounding and proposed building heights are consistent. We've maintained our highest height consistent with some of the surrounding approvals. We've taken a step down approach as you move more towards the single family adjacent to us. So our highest heights are along the bay, lowest where we're adjacent to residential neighbors. In particular, wanted to look a little closer at this mixed use tract where we have a maximum height of 50 feet. That is where we're adjacent to the El Dorado Acres subdivision. El Dorado itself allows for a maximum of 35 feet. This community here, Cielo at the Colony, is just to the south of us. That allows for a maximum of 126 feet. We also saw on previous slides that there's a enhanced type B buffer along the eastern property line of the mixed use.
All right, you want to explain what
Tract.
that is?
Yeah, so it's a type B buffer. It's a 10-foot type B buffer. All of the same plantings that you would see in a type B buffer, that's 10 feet.
And what would that include?
I don't have the planting requirements for a type B, but we haven't requested a deviation from those typical type B plantings. Goal 6 is related to commercial land uses, so addresses the review criteria for commercial development. In this case, we have provided for a reduction of commercial and office square footage in the DRI to ensure that there's no impacts to the surrounding transportation system. The buffers meet or exceed the LDC requirements, and the utilities are available from Bonita Springs Utilities. Our maximum building heights, we've also demonstrated, are comparable to those surrounding. Policy 6.1.2 is related to a limitation to minor commercial development within non-urban future land use categories. Our request is limited to 25,000 square feet of office, and
Well, you're really not in a non-urban classification. You're outlying suburban. That's an urban classification.
the commercial development is also located, as Ted mentioned, near the intersection of Coconut Road and Saltleaf Boulevard. Policy 6.1.3, 6.1.4, and 6.1.5 require rezonings to address compatibility with surrounding uses, public services, and traffic capacity. We've proposed the proposed rezoning complies with the development standards in the LDC, except where we have deviations requested. The compatibility with surrounding neighbors is provided through pretty expansive preserve areas, setbacks, and the buffers that are throughout the development. Development in the PD generally is limited to areas that have been previously cleared, and we have not impacted any of the existing preserve areas. And as Ted walked us through, the TIS demonstrates a reduction in overall vehicle trips. Looking more at Goal 6, policies 6.1.6, 6.1.7, and 6.1.11 require open space buffering, landscaping, encourage commercial development in infill areas, and encourage the revitalization of deteriorating commercial areas. Again, got the buffers on the screen demonstrating buffering, open space, preserve areas. We've also, again, mentioned that the development is limited to the existing golf course areas or previously areas that were previously programmed for development. Regarding policy 11.1.2, to address calculation of density and mixed-use developments, again, I've mentioned that we have not obtained any density through the non-residential areas of the PD. And we are consistent with the future land use categories allowable densities. Which again, another repeat slide demonstrating how we calculated that density, the overall increase or decrease to those intensities and densities in the DRI, and how they relate to the proposed MPD. Policies 59.1.3, policy 60.1.1, and policy 60.1.2 address floodplain regulations. We have no development proposed in the floodway. The surface water management system is proposed to provide treatment and protect groundwater, and wetland and upland preservation maximizes protection of the natural resource, natural surface water flowways, and other associated habitats. Continuing to look at floodplain regulations in the Lee Plan. That was a couple of additional policies as well, 60.4.1 through 60.4.3. Policy 61.1.1 and 61.1.6 address management of fresh waters and require surface water and low quality groundwater to be used for irrigation where reuse is not available. Again, the applicant is obtaining an ERP from the South Florida Water Management District. The surface water management system is designed in compliance with the Lee Plan and LDC, and surface water is proposed for all irrigation of landscaping, and potable water will not be used for irrigation purposes. Reuse water is not available in this location. Policy 100.1.1, 100.1.2, 101.3.2, and 101.3.4 address protection of wetlands. They restrict development in the coastal high hazard area and require information regarding hurricane evacuation and shelter information to be provided to residents. As we've mentioned, wetlands are protected throughout the on-site preserve areas. The ERP requirements and on-site surface water management system will be in place as well. The site protects over 204 acres of preserve areas, including mangrove wetlands, and there are no wetland impacts proposed within the coastal high hazard area. Policies 123.1.5 through 123.2.6, 123.2.8, 123.2.13, and 123.2.15 address protection of natural habitats. Shane walked us through the preserve areas and the protections that have been in place for the wildlife species on site or potentially on site. Proposed preserve areas exceed the LDC requirements, and we're preserving large contiguous areas of habitat. A few more policies related to the protection of wildlife. So objective 123.3, policy 123.3.3. We provide on-site preserves to protect wildlife habitat, provide long-term protection in those areas. Objective 123.8 and the associated policy address the protection of gopher tortoises. Again, Shane walked us through the Indigenous Preserve Management Plan and the location of burrows that have been on site and relocation in accordance with state permitting guidelines. Objective 123.10 addresses the protection of wood stork feeding areas and roosting areas. There were no wood stork rookeries or roosting areas documented on site. Compensation for impacts will be provided through enhancement and preservation of on-site wetland areas and through the purchase of credits from an approved mitigation bank. And on-site preserves provide for additional potential foraging habitat.
So this compensation is necessary because there is habitat for these birds, even though none were spotted?
I'll let Shane answer that.
Okay. He can speak after you. Continue.
Okay. Objective 124, policy 124.1.1 and 124.1.2 address the protection of wetlands. The proposed development is limited to previously impacted areas. Our density is calculated at one dwelling unit per 20 acres in all wetlands that are proposed to be impacted. There's a condition that is proposed that requires construction can't commence until an ERP is obtained to authorize any impacts to wetlands. Policy 125.1.2 addresses the protection of surface and groundwater. And our stormwater lakes provide for water quality protection, and again, we're obtaining an ERP from the South Florida Water Management District. Looking at the conditions, there were a couple of changes noted in the 48-hour notice. This first change is to the list of uses within the mixed use tract. The change is not intended to be substantive, but is clarifying that what is currently listed as accessory uses, buildings and structures with a sub listing of limited to warehouse, hybrid, public, and mini. We're just pulling that listing out and adding it to the end of the list as a separate standalone item. It still identifies that they're accessory to the principal uses within the MPD only. The staff and the applicant are in agreement on this change. And then, as I mentioned, the modified type B buffer is provided as a change to condition 5 to allow for that buffering to occur along El Dorado Acres. With that, it's my professional opinion that the Pelican Landing MPDs met all of the applicable standards and demonstrated consistency with the Lee Plan and the Land Development Code.
Thank you.
And that's the end of our presentation. As we've noted, there's a staff recommendation of approval. We're in agreement with all of the staff recommendations and the staff report. We've demonstrated consistency with the Lee Plan and the Land Development Code, and we're compatible with the surrounding land use pattern. So we're seeking approval as requested and amended in the 48-hour letter.
And your testimony was staff is accepting of the requested changes to the conditions in your 48-hour letter?
Correct. With that, we're open for any other questions. I know Shane had to respond to
Yes.
questions as well.
And Beth, could you explain the composition of the committee?
Yes, it's in my. after?
No, when you do your
I got
presentation. We have members of the public
Yep.
here in it.
Hello, Shane Johnson for the record. Yes, with respect to your question regarding the wood stork, there were no wood storks observed on the property. However, the property is contained within a defined area called a core foraging area for the species. I believe it's a 25-kilometer area from an existing rookery. So if that buffer zone, that 25-kilometer buffer zone overlaps a project that has wetland impacts, then mitigation for the wood stork is typically required. So that would pertain to future impacts, not anything that's, previously
It's
happened.
not proposed here, right? No.
Well, I mean, some could be in the future with a development application.
I see.
So I mentioned in my presentation, I think it's 98% of the existing wetlands are already under conservation easement, so those cannot be impacted. There's a very small amount of wetlands, that 2%, it's just over 2 acres, under 3 acres, of exotic infested wetlands that if impacts are proposed to those wetlands, that would require not only mitigation for those wetlands, but also compensation for the wood stork. So if and when the applicant goes to, development and proposes impacts to those wetlands, they would likely purchase credit from a mitigation bank to offset that mitigation need for the wetlands themselves, which would in turn provide mitigation for the wood stork. It's sort of a coupled mitigation,
Will benefit.
dual benefit.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
Okay, that concludes the applicant's
We-
presentation.
One more clarification, if you don't mind.
Yeah, clarification.
Good morning, Alexis Crespo. I work at RVI as a certified planner with Jim France. I just wanted to clarify a couple of points and questions you had asked because I was able to look those up while Jim was presenting. The Type B buffer proposed adjacent to Eldorado Estates will be, again, 10 feet in width. The plantings within that buffer will be 5 trees per 100 linear feet. It will also contain a double hedgerow maintained at 60 inches to provide significant opacity in that lower section of the buffer. I'll also note that no deviation is being proposed along that shared property line with Eldorado Estates. The project will comply with section 34935, where the setback will likely be driven by the proposed building height, and that setback would be 25 feet at minimum, assuming that the 50-foot building height is ultimately constructed on development order plans. And so again, no deviation from that separation being proposed. You had noted in terms of policy 6.1.2, that relates to non-urban areas in the LEAP plan. We are in agreement with you that this is a future urban area. It is within predominantly outlying suburban as well as suburban, and therefore policy 6.1.2 does not apply. Be that as it may, we are consistent with Goal 6 and the applicable policies related to commercial development and have certainly reduced the intensity of the project through the application. Lastly, Shane mentioned that there's the ability, due to the exotic infestation, to potentially impact approximately 2.7 acres of wetlands within the project. Those would be freshwater, non-mangrove. The density tables that Jem presented anticipated those impacts. While it's not permitted yet or necessarily planned, we did do a worst-case scenario from a density calc related to potential wetland impacts down the road.
Is that taken into account in the ERP or no?
I'll defer to Jackie LaRock on that item.
Hello, Jackie LaRock again. No, the current ERP does not have those wetlands taken into account. If London Bay chose to do that in the future, another ERP would be required.
All right, so they do a permit mod if they end up having to impact those areas.
Yes, ma'am.
But at any rate, the development order is going to require them to remove the exotics from that area.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. That concludes the applicant's presentation. I'm going to ask to take a 5-minute break, and then we will resume with staff's presentation. Thank you. We are back on the record with staff's presentation.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Beth Workman. I'm a principal planner in the zoning section. I've been accepted as an expert in the Lee Plan and Land Development Code, and I wish to be accepted today as well.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. So I have a few housekeeping items to start. I have the PowerPoint presentation, and then I also have a binder with emails that staff has received since Thursday and Friday of last week, and I've compiled them into this binder for the public input via email.
Okay. So this will be, the PowerPoint will be staff exhibit 5. And exhibit 6 will be a composite of the emails you received and since what day?
Since Thursday of last week, Thursday, Friday, Monday, and yesterday. And that's that binder.
Okay, thank you.
The applicant has received those emails as well via email. I compiled them and sent them to them.
Just a minute to mark it. You may begin.
So the case before you today, Madam Hearing Examiner, is Pelican Landing Mixed Use Plan Development. It also has a companion DRI 2024-00001. The zoning case is DCI 2023-00052. So going over the request for the rezone, it's to rezone 430 acres from residential plan development and commercial plan development to a mixed-use plan development. The request is 729 dwelling units, which consist of 100 single-family and 629 multifamily, 25,000 square feet of office use, 27 golf holes, 318 hotel rooms, private on-site recreation accessory uses, and building heights ranging from 50 feet to 290 feet. So that's it in a nutshell. The important part about the DRI's component in this is that the density and the reduction in commercial office as well as retail commercial and the golf holes and the increase in the hotel rooms is what's hinging on this zoning case. So without the DRI DO amendment, we could not hear the zoning case, and that was why we had to remand back to staff so that we could get the DRI prepared and have them come in together for the hearing. So you'll hear about the DRI like you did from the applicant because it hinges, the zoning case hinges on that. So looking at the location, this is the zoning case. So outlined in red is the Pelican Landing rezone to mixed-use plan development. As the applicant stated, it's in 3 different future land use categories. This is important to look at not only from the land use aspect, but also to ensure that what is going on in the DRI, even if we didn't have a DRI and we were going to go on the future land use category, we would be consistent with the density in the Lee plan.
So it supports itself.
Yes. So if the DRI was rescinded tomorrow, this section would be able to support itself with the suburban, outlying suburban, and wetlands future land use category. And that is stated in the DRI staff report in detail. So this is the development of regional impact, or the DRI 2024-00001. This is the expanse of the DRI. You can see it goes into south of Coconut Road. There's a small little island piece down here. So what does that mean? So what it means is the breakdown of that density. So right now, as we sit here, the DRI is approved for 3,912 dwelling units. The applicant wants a total of 4,400 to go into the DRI. And what that looks like is these are the entitlements. And the applicant did a nice job going over this because it gets kind of confusing. This DRI has been around since the late 80s, early 90s. So it's had a lot of different changes as the years went by. One of which was to increase the density to 4,400. So back in the mid 2000s, there was a DO amendment that came in that allowed for 4,400 dwelling units within the overall DRI. And then it was reduced back down to the 3,912. So it's always been kind of capped at 4,400. So the applicant coming in to amend the DRI DO to go to 4,400 is a natural cap that has been in place throughout the history of the DRI. What staff did is per our requirements in the land development code is to make sure that it could stand on its own. It wasn't falling in the face of the Lee plan. So it could, with the wetlands and the conservative calculation on density, it could stand on its own if they were to rescind the DRI. This is almost at build out. So that's why we asked the question during the DRI, could you rescind? Because this thing, as you're going to see, and the applicant stated, it's been sliced and diced in different jurisdictions. And so City of Bonita Springs has been tracking their own DRI DOs with the changes that come in. And then unincorporated has our own DRI DOs. So there's been some waxing and waning of density and uses throughout. But what this chart is very important because it shows at the very last column what's happening. What is the difference? So the zoning case and the DRI, we're increasing 488 dwelling units. We're reducing office. We're reducing retail. We're reducing to the one whole, and we're increasing the rooms in the hotel. This is what helps the traffic impact statement, as Mr. Treesh has stated. And then there's also the component of the Kersey Smoot that Ms. Franz went over in detail about what the allocation is, the 241 dwelling units. They're entitled to the subject property, and the 121 that are left over in Kersey Smoot. That's an important component in the DRI and also in the rezoning, because those are allocated to the subject property that gets you to the difference of 488. So this is looking at the development of regional impact and the lay of the land on the units to get to the 4,400 that's being requested. So it kind of goes through the breakdown of what's available, what's committed, and the same thing for unincorporated. So it splits it into the Bonita Springs, Estero, and then unincorporated, because this thing spans 3 different jurisdictions. This is the chart that goes over the future land use category. Ms. Franz went over this in detail, showing that 893 dwelling units could be permitted on this site. And with the 121 and the 488, you're well under this number. So looking at the height, so this is the master concept plan for the subject property. The master concept plan, really all it's doing, as stated, the golf course, the preserve, the flowway, all the conservation easements are all in place. The only thing the applicant is doing is coming in and coloring in the MF, the RES, and the MU with uses that are in the schedule of uses. And then the height is changing. And as they went over in detail, from the north to the south, the height decreases as it moves closer to El Dorado Estates, which has 35-foot single-family residential homes existing on site. And so with that, you can see that the multifamily, single-family could go up here. Towers could be built at 290. Residential towers could be built at 100 feet. Townhomes, single family. This, where the golf barn is currently, could be single family, the offices, or I believe townhomes can also go in here at 50 feet. And that's important to notice as the surrounding uses that were permitted and already built. West Bay is at 290. And as you work down to the south, you get a 290-foot, 285-foot buildings. So this kind of is the puzzle piece in here that kind of goes in and wedges to give the transition of height down as you work towards El Dorado. So this is the surrounding land uses and jurisdictions. Reviewing the DRI and the zoning, we vacillated into the city of Bonita Springs. We have villages of Estero in this purple, and you can kind of see that puzzle piece. This is unincorporated Lee County. So this is that hole in the donut that Ms. Franz was talking about. And then you have the subject property that wraps around that hole in the donut of Kersey Smoot and comes over into this region. So really all we're doing is we're coloring in this piece, and this piece that wraps around the donut with development. Everything else is set. So the environmental, the drainage, the ERP is set. All they're really doing is bringing in the uses in those 3 different areas. As stated by Ms. Rock, there is public services. Bonita Springs Utilities provided a letter of availability. There's estimated to be 301,400 gallons per day estimated for the usage, and the Bonita Springs Utilities has stated that they have the capacity for the sewer, potable water, and the irrigation. The police and fire are located in close proximity, about 2.5 miles. This is the fire station and the emergency management. And then this star right here is where the sheriff's office is located. Our property is right here. Schools, through the 48-hour letter, the school provided a letter saying that they do have the availability. Spring Creek Elementary School is 3.5 miles to the southeast. The Estero High School is 3 miles to the northeast. There is public transit along 41. Lee Trans serves US 41 north and south. And there's also a number of bikeways and greenways along 41 and a shared use path that are all within the Lee plan. That's along 41. So to get to there, Coconut Road, the applicant will be required to demonstrate sidewalks along Coconut Road for their property. Transportation went over in detail. Mr. Treesh did a good job showing the differences in how this is not going to affect the traffic. It's not going to have a negative effect on Coconut Road. Coconut Road is operating at a level D, level of service, with or without the project. So by reducing what currently is allowed on the site and balancing that site with the increases to density in hotel rooms, we get a no net increase or loss. This shows the difference in the internal trip capture. This is directly from the traffic impact statement with the approved DRI versus the internal capture. For the proposed, there's a reduction. And then this is the peak trip count that they did for the PM weekday peak hour trips that shows what the capacity would need to be on those roadways. And then this is the level D showing with or without the project. Looking at deviation 14, I'm kind of going to skip around these deviations a little bit just by what we're looking at. So deviation 14 was for the interconnectivity, the connection separation. DOT provided a memo stating that they were okay with this deviation because it lines up, it's existing, and it lines up with Via Veneto Boulevard, which is right across the street. So that deviation was approved. Environmental, Mr. Johnson, as he stated, everything's in place. There's a bald eagle management plan, the flowway is intact, the all the preserves are in conservation easements, and they're under maintenance right now with the state. So they've already been inspected and they're under maintenance. This thing's been going on for that long. We did have an ADD come in for Raptor Bay that provided a connection through the wetlands, and that showed mitigation for that connection. All of those conditions are codified into this zoning. So anything that had come in on the Kersey Smoot or the Pelican Landing, we codified the conditions that apply to this area. So it's all in one spot. So if there was an ADD like the Raptor Bay, that all those conditions and the exhibits of cross sections are all part of the master concept plan and the list of conditions.
Will there be an amendment to the Kersey Smoot project to reflect the removal of this property? Because otherwise, it's not going to comply with the law.
So staff originally had a condition in that the applicant and Kersey Smoot would need to amend their plan development to remove the section of land and then codify to meet the DRI. And meeting with the applicant and the county attorney's office, they decided that it was not necessary to have that condition in there. And so at the time of anything coming in on Kersey Smoot, that will trip the need to come in and make the changes to their plan development.
Okay.
So this is for the open space. This is the open space table directly off the master concept
Did they
plan.
render this opinion to you in writing?
Not in writing. So the applicant is complying with the open space for residential, non-residential, and the mixed use area. There's several deviations that were already approved as part of past zonings, and deviation 6 was one of them for the lake bank slopes. So this thing was developed and built prior to code changes from a 4-to-1 lake bank slope to a 6-to-1 lake bank slope. So we've granted a deviation 6 to allow the lakes to remain at a 4-to-1. Deviation 9 is from internal buffering. If this were to come in, there would be walls and 30-foot buffers between single family and commercial uses and roadways and things like that. And so because this is a mixed plan development, we're granting the internal buffering to be allowed, waived from the requirements. Deviation 13 is from perimeter buffers. When there's preserves that abut perimeter buffers, we allow the preserves to act as the buffer. And so what this deviation does is it allows for that to be granted around the perimeter of the development so that those preserves can act as the type F buffer in some instances. Those areas that do not have the preserves will have to meet the land development code. So there's some sections periodically along the north abutting West Bay where a type F buffer is required. And along the eastern side where the development abuts, the golf course abuts El Dorado, there's a type F buffer. And then we have a separate condition as an enhancement along this area right here for a type B buffer. And a type B buffer that's modified because there's easements throughout this area, and the applicant can provide a 10-foot easement-free area to plant the B buffer plantings. A type B buffer planting, as Ms. Crespo indicated, is the same as a type D. It's 5 trees every 100 feet. So for every 100 feet, 5 trees, and then there's a double staggered hedgerow that is provided throughout the whole property line. B buffer and D buffer are matching. The only difference is this is going to be 15 feet, that'll be 10. So that's the compatibility part, because staff was concerned about the vantage point into the MU from the El Dorado development, which I can show on the master concept plan in a little bit. But even though there's an F buffer going in up here, you still have this angular access, because this is 50 feet in here. So we wanted to protect those folks that are abutting this section. So there's a number of deviations from parking, sidewalk, and signage that the applicant went over thoroughly. 5-foot wide sidewalks along one side of the internal roadway. This was previously granted on another section of a PD. We're just granting it again. Deviation to back out parking onto right-of-way easements and all tracks, that was previously approved. We're carrying that forward. 0-foot setback from right-of-ways on all tracks. We're granting that easement. This is a mixed plan development, so you have this intensity inside the development for the buildings and the uses, and then as you work to the perimeter, you have your buffers that are going in that will kind of separate that intensity. So deviation 7 is the 5% reduction in parking for the golf clubhouse only. This was previously approved. This is just giving a little reduction because this is a mixed use, because, you know, some of these, the golf club, they're in golf cart capability, walking capability to get there. So the reduction was granted previously. And then deviation 10 is allow 1 parking space per 1,000 square feet of floor area for private rec and integrated into the mid and high-rise buildings. And this is because some of these buildings will have their recreation facilities built in them. So by reducing that parking, because they're already in their building and it's walkable to be able to get to that. So development pattern, this is going over the setbacks, the building separation, and the height. So looking at deviation 3, it's a 0-foot separation for internal parcels and a 15-foot separation for external parcels. So this was previously approved and carried over. The allowance in deviation 5 for the 20-foot distance between recreation centers and ancillary facilities and the residential dwelling units, this was previously approved, a 20-foot distance from this. Because you are entering into a mixed plan development, this all goes back to that mixed plan development kind of a scenario. And then Ms. Fran's testimony on deviation 8 for the height. It should be noted that the previous approval allowed a 20-story over parking with 15% open space for each multifamily and a minimum building separation of 125 feet. So there's a building separation deviation that is deviation 12. And so when staff was reviewing deviation 8 and 12 to see how it applied in this particular plan development, we were concerned with fire. So with your separation between buildings lessening, would the fire department be able to get in there with a truck with the ladder? And they provided, as part of the outstanding issue in the staff report in the 48-hour letter, the fire district, Estero Fire District, provided a letter of no objection for those distances. So deviation 11 was the 0-foot setback for the perimeter. This is being granted except for abutting preserves because the 0-foot setback does not meet the preserve setback. So when you're a wetland preserve, you're required to have a 20-foot setback for all structures, and that wouldn't meet that requirement. So staff put except for abutting preserves and the north property line, which has a 30-foot buffer. So the master concept plan kind of shows you the layout of where F buffers are located and where they're not, and the runaround of the perimeter of this site and the varying compatibility that's taking place. And the highly sensitive areas that staff really paid attention to was the El Dorado Estates, because these are 35-foot tall homes abutting the golf course, which they've been abutting, and then this is going to be the change from a golf cart barn to the commercial offices, single family or townhomes, and so that'll be 50 feet in here. So that's where the B buffer is, 10 feet, because of that vantage into here, and then you have a 30-foot F buffer that's
So
in
right
this
now,
one.
there is no buffer between the golf course and El Dorado?
Right here, no.
No, what about the golf course? 'Cause
Here,
it's not already
yes.
developed?
Yes.
So that's just acknowledging existing conditions?
Yep. This is all what was previously conditioned all the way around. The applicant's not changing anything. So we have F buffers or preserves meeting the requirement. There's no buffer over here. And then there's an F that runs along here.
Okay, so B has no wall, it's just 10 feet landscaped.
Yep. And the shrubs are increased in height to 60 inches. So this is the lay of the land on that. There's an interface preserve that runs along this portion right here. This is where that setback comes in, where they wanted 0-foot setback, and staff was like, you can have 0-foot setback except for along the north property line and this interface here, because you're going to need a 20-foot setback for the wetland preserve. And so the applicant went through the Lee plan analysis. I'm not going to go super in depth into this because staff is in agreement with the applicant that they are meeting the Lee plan when it comes to commercial design as well as residential. The public services are being fulfilled. There's visual harmony with what the buffering, they've been sensitive to where they're placing the height variations on the site compared to what's surrounding uses. And so it's my professional opinion that the applicant is meeting the land development code and the Lee plan for approval.
Thank you. I don't have any questions at the moment.
Okay,
You can take your seat.
thank you.
We're going to turn now to public input. I'm going to call the names on these sheets. If not everybody filled out a sheet, I will invite anyone else in the room that wishes to speak. So we'll start with Ann Kramer.
Thanks so much, Madam Hearing Examiner. I am not exactly organized in all of my thoughts here. I will try not to be repetitive in what I'm saying, but we did receive a letter at the end of May saying there would be a hearing, but it didn't give the date of the hearing. It said it hadn't been established yet. Just 10 calendar days away, most of the people in Pelican Landing became aware that this hearing was going to be today. So I just came in last night. I'm a little disoriented with my notes, but I'll try to get to my points here. I have a copy of a map. It was a revision that was done to the planned development. And as was stated before, a number of revisions have been developed over the years. And I believe, as was said before, the bulk of the residential units had been in the Pelican Landing Community Association area, which is south of Coconut Road. The traffic strain that will be established if this is approved, we already have hundreds of properties that have not yet been built. Some of those are in Kersey Smoot, and I'm a little bit confused over the jurisdiction of where Kersey Smoot is. Is that in Bonita Springs or is that in unincorporated Lee County? But in any event, London Bay purchased the remaining unbuilt area of the timeshare property. So there are about 290 units that had been permitted to be built there. There was a total of 362, I believe. 72 or so have been built, so that's another 290 that London Bay will be able to develop. In the section, and I know this is not part of today's discussion, so to speak, but in a section that is part of the city of Bonita Springs, WCI and London Bay at different times, went to the city of Bonita Springs, and even though at the time, and I don't know if it's still true for unincorporated Lee County, but in some of these areas for the RPD, at the time, the minimum height was 45 feet. There was an annexation agreement. A big portion of property was annexed into the city of Bonita Springs. Some people called it contract zoning. There were about 400 units that were approved there in towers, so that was way higher than the 45 feet. So those units are not part of this discussion, I don't believe, today, but those are yet to be built as well. We also have the Ritz-Carlton properties that are being built, so there's over 200 units there. So all of this will contribute to the traffic issues on Coconut Road. Now, Coconut Road also has feeding into it Spring Creek Village, El Dorado Acres, Meadowbrook Estates, Coconut Shores. There's the new development that was talked about earlier today that will be at the corner of 41 and Coconut. And then I believe on the other corner, the southwest corner, there also may be a hotel at some point. So all of that is going to contribute to a situation that already has considerable amount of traffic. And I'm not so sure that a circle on the portion of Coconut Road that's close to Route 41 is going to make that big of a difference to all of those people who are on the western part of that. And it's already very difficult to come out of El Dorado Acres, Meadowbrook, Coconut Shores, the Pelican Landing beach parking lot, the CDD parking lot that's there. If you're trying to take a left and get up to Route 41, it's a very difficult situation as it is. The Ritz-Carlton property is they've got a restaurant there too. It's going to be a tremendous amount of traffic. If the hotel room numbers are increased, the hotel staff in itself creates a huge amount of traffic, let alone the visitors to the hotel. I have a document here that goes back a ways. This is, but it's still valid. This is, I think, from February of 2003, and it talks about the DRI, and it talks about 8 residential buildings being permitted to be 20 stories over parking, and that was a condition 12 of a prior change to the DRI. Now those, in the planned unit development in the DRI, again, most of the development was going to be south of Coconut Road, including, it talks about 8 residential buildings and 1 hotel building. So we already have the 1 hotel building, that's the Hyatt. Now, apparently London Bay would like to build another one. Maybe it would be a Ritz-Carlton, I don't know. But at one time, it appeared that there was only 1 hotel that was approved. Now, I think it's just under 500 rooms. This would add a significant number of hotel rooms to the area. And all of the residential tower buildings for the DRI were at one point intended to be along a corridor that was south of Coconut Road in the colony portion of Pelican Landing, and there were none that were slated to be north of Coconut Road. Obviously, that has now changed considerably, even with the 4 that the city of Bonita Springs, and the city, one of the later city councils, after the annexation agreement occurred, city council that came about after that tried to fight that approval. They made some sort of agreement outside of a court and apparently agreed to allow 4 towers to be built there. So in any event, we have a tremendous amount of growth that even without the addition of these units, and I think I've got that notation here somewhere in my notes, even without that addition, there would be 322 unbuilt, at this point, I believe there's 322 unbuilt residential units. So if you add 488 more, basically you're up to that area trying to support another 800 residential units in the DRI north of Coconut Road. So 800 of those added to the 200 plus that are in the Ritz-Carlton residential units. That's a huge amount of additional traffic, and then add to that the hotel rooms, and it's a very difficult situation for the people who need to use that. Most of the building was done in the PLCA, Pelican Landing Community Association, very deliberately, I would presume. There are 3 entrances to the community on Route 41, entrances and exits, and 1 on Coconut Road for the people in the colony, who can also get out on some of the other exits, but Coconut Road is certainly the most convenient. So I hope that that explains some of what our concerns are. For the rezoning, the DRI contemplated the office and retail space would be located in the corridor by US 41, which is currently built out, and therefore reducing such space as is being said, they're going to trade off that space for residential space, really seems to be somewhat of an empty argument, because that area north of Coconut Road was really never intended to be commercial space. All of that was put along the 41 corridor. So I think that they've pretty much maxed that out. And I'm just trying to, again, I apologize that I'm not a little bit more polished in my presentation, but this was done on very short notice. The village of Estero, my understanding, who is responsible for the major portion of Coconut Road, and that would be from the colony exit onto Coconut Road, north to 41. I understand they were not even notified by the county of this hearing, or even the applicants, the application for expansion of the density in the Saltleaf area. So they became aware of this when the president of the Colony Foundation contacted them, which is a bit unfortunate. Again, I just came back in last night. I flew in from Buffalo. I know that there would be a lot more people here, except as often happens, and I'm sure you've seen this, oftentimes hearings such as this with developers who want to do something in a seasonal community, sometimes, try to schedule their hearings when a lot of the people aren't here. But I do believe that you do have in the packet of information that was given from Beth, thank you, Beth, you do have some letters from the president of the Colony Foundation and a number of other residents. So I thank you for listening to me, and I may have missed a few things, and I apologize for that, but I hope that my input is helpful.
Thank you very much. Edward Lorenzini.
Thank you, madam. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak at this hearing. For the record, my name is Edward Lorenzini. I'm a resident of Estero. And I actually, like Ms. Ann just spoke about, I actually learned about this hearing last night. It was brought to my attention by some neighbor friends, and they were unfortunately unable to come here today. I took time to come in. Anyway, I'm here mostly as a resident, to bring concerns and thoughts into this to be taken into consideration as this project is being considered for advancing into its other stages that the applicant would like to do. So before I get into those concerns, listening to what I heard today and the research that I've done little by little throughout the time hearing through this, when I hear about the processes and the legalities and the zoning and the everything involved in trying to make a project go into become fruition for whether it's this applicant or any applicant, on face value, it looks pretty straightforward. As far as does it fit the rules? Does it fit the code? Does it fit the zoning? Does it fit the legalities? Does it fit everything? On the surface, it looks really good. And I'm a real estate broker in the area, so it's kind of like an oxymoron for me to be discussing this. But I always look for balances on things and practicality. And what I see is, despite the fact that this project, the way it's being presented, makes sense, there's certain practical aspects that I don't know if they really truly are being taken into consideration. If I may start with traffic. A gentleman stated today that and I'm paraphrasing because I took some notes, that there would really be no net impact on the traffic on Coconut Road. Well, I'm a resident in that area, that specific area. Now, I don't know if the applicant any of the applicant's representatives are residents in that specific area, but Coconut Road becomes extremely congested. Yes, there's peak times, but even in off-peak times, it gets a little difficult to navigate. As Ms. Ann mentioned, you have El Dorado Acres, you have Meadowbrook Estates, you have Coconut Shores, you have other residences in the back that have access into that. You have Pelican Landings and the colonies exit and egress into that. You have the Hyatt Regency already there. You have other things going on. For this level of increase in density, though in the plan makes sense, in practical sense doesn't make sense. Because now you're adding potential 318 revolving hotel rooms, all this density in residential. I do have a specific question about the residential for the applicant, if I may.
Yeah, you can ask the question, they will make a note of it, and then at the conclusion of public input, they will address all questions raised. So yes, please do ask questions.
Thank you, madam. My question in regards to the dwelling units, what percentage of that is being considered as full-time residents and versus vacation/seasonal residents? Do they have have they done a study on that? Who is their specific clientele, if you will, okay, for this project? Because that's important to know. If you have seasonal, you can almost mitigate it. If it's full-time residents, that's a big problem. What percentage of it is it? Because I do not see logically in my mind that there's going to be no net impact on the traffic in that area. Now, you have emergency situations, hurricane season, this, that, and the other. Yes, there has to be an emergency plan. They have only one egress and one ingress, as far as I can tell, for what I understand from this project. I could be wrong, but that also adds to traffic flow issues. So taking into consideration everyday use, emergencies, all of that nature. I don't know if they mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned consultation with FDOT or if it was just an independent traffic assessment being done, which either way needs to be, I think, clarified. Maybe I missed that. I apologize if I did. As far as the roundabout, I would agree with what Ms. Ann was speaking about, that the roundabout doesn't make any sense to put in that area there. What it'll do is it'll actually slow down and back up the traffic all the way down to the Hyatt Regency. It already backs up quite a bit in that area. Mostly obviously during peak times and off times. But during season, it's a nightmare. the residents over there have major, major problems coming out of their communities. Now, aside from an unrealistic approach of adding lights at every community entrance, doesn't make any sense. Is there also a thought about widening or expanding, widening the Coconut Road? Is that part of the project or not? Was that a consideration or not? Is that even feasible? Now again, I'm going with practicality. Everything on the surface looks good, but as far as practicality and functionality, one is theory, one is actual putting things to work. The other aspect, and the one that I would like to ask about, is water management. Was the Army Corps of Engineers consulted in any way, shape, or form? I can tell you that that area over there, and I've experienced this on the light end stuff because I'm actually closer to 41. I live closer to 41 in that area. There's a flooding pain in the neck. You add more construction, more buildings, more everything. You affect the sheet flow of water. You affect the absorbing aspect of the preserves and the natural element there to help mitigate flooding. We already have plenty of flooding as it is there. And I understand there's existing infrastructure, but when you add all of these things into the entire project, you're affecting, this is not one house here, one house there. This is a massive project that they're working on. And respectfully, I think that has to be taken into consideration. Yeah, they can probably, in order to mitigate that, being so close to Estero Bay, you'd have to elevate those properties. Where's that water going to go? It's going to flood back into Meadowbrook, El Dorado Acres, Marsh Landing, Coconut Shores, Fountain Lakes, and probably even into West Bay. Otherwise, you run the risk of flooding all those homes there. That has to be elevated. There has to be fill brought in. That has to be elevated in order for people who are going to spend the kind of money that you're looking to do for a project of this manner to be able to invest in a home that close, to have that waterway on a major area that gets highly impacted by winds and storm surge. You have to raise that. So you're going to create unnatural pockets because of the construction that you do. Things to take into consideration. How is that being mitigated? Was the Army Corps of Engineers consulted on this as well to get their hopefully unbiased opinion on this project? I'm not trying to create any unnecessary obstacles. What I'm trying to do is bring some reality and practicality into the thought and development of this project, because it affects not just the bottom line for this project, it affects thousands of people around. Thousands of people around. So you have the traffic issues, you have water management issues. What about environmental? I heard today that, for example, the wood stork issue and things of that nature. Now, I understand that not all animals, I love animals. I'm sure many people here do too. That's why we're in Southwest Florida. We enjoy the environment that we are part of, whether it's the dolphin, the birds, the alligators, whatever. But animals are not susceptible to our laws in the sense of they have migratory patterns. Were those migratory patterns taken into consideration when these assessments or so-called studies were made? Just because you don't observe an animal doesn't mean it doesn't come to that area. The tortoises kind of threw me off a little bit. There was a graphic that was put up that had like over 100 different supposed gopher tortoise holes. Yet only 3 gopher tortoises were observed on the property or around that area. It makes no sense to me. Gopher tortoises don't migrate from here to Miami and back. I'm sorry, it's not how it works. I'm not a specialist on these animals or anything like that, but I'm just trying to look at the practicality and the reality and the logic behind it. So you have those animals. Nothing was mentioned about Florida panther. I know there's Florida panther in there. I saw one. I know people that have seen them. They're in this area. They don't just reside on the little pockets close to 41. They have large ranges that they traverse. It's a natural aspect of the animal. I've actually gone ahead and called up FWC and let them know I saw a Florida panther at this place, at this location, at this time. Gave them the best coordinates, let them know about it. So we do have Florida panthers there. Nothing was mentioned today about that. We have bobcats, wild hogs, of course. That's another thing. Is there a plan in place for handling invasive species, such as the wild hogs, such as the iguanas, the green iguanas, things of that nature? I haven't heard any of these things that are very practical and very real to everybody there. We're all affected by those things. So traffic, water flow, flooding issues, potential, density, wildlife, conservation aspect. These are a lot of very practical things why people come here. So those are things that are concerns to me, even though, again, I am a real estate broker in the area. I understand the need for development and the willingness and the wantingness to do that. But there has to be a balance about things. There was something else that I'd like to bring up. And that was, as far as the water management is concerned, or actually not water management, more of the buffers and things of that nature. What is being done with the mangroves exactly, especially along Estero Bay? Are they being relocated? Are they being left intact as natural barriers for those areas along Estero Bay? What is the actual process of what's being done to handle those things? Because those are natural. Not only do they provide natural buffers against water surge, wind, but they also provide habitat for animals, birds, fish, all kinds of wildlife. So those are some concerns that I'd like to bring up. And with those questions that I made, I'm sure there's other things, but again, I just heard about this last night, so my preparation is very limited.
Well, we'll try to get you some clarification on the
Yes.
issues that you raised. Thank you for sharing that.
And I appreciate your time, and I guess we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Bernard Kramer?
Good morning. Thank you for hearing me. My name is Bernard Kramer, excuse me, a resident of Pelican Landing for the last 20 years, and I'm an elected representative of the Bayside Community Development District.
Are you any relation to
Yes.
Ann? Okay. But you're speaking in your official capacity?
I'm speaking in my official capacity. We have a maintenance building that is located in unincorporated Lee County, right off of Coconut Road. We have approximately 35 people who work there on a daily basis, 5 days a week, and during storm seasons, more and more. I'm concerned about the traffic. We access and egress our maintenance building on an hourly basis with our carts across the road into Pelican Landing and the colony to provide surface water management cleanup in those areas. So it's a concern of mine. It's a concern that we haven't been notified of this particular plan. We do know through some of our communications that this is going to happen at some period of time, but we need to be involved as custodians of our surface water management and other individual activities in Pelican Landing going across the road, primarily the traffic pattern. So that's all I have to say, and hope to be kept in contact as far as our management group is concerned. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other members of the public present that would like to speak on the record? Seeing none, we're going to close public input. We will go back to the parties to address questions and issues that were raised, provide some clarification for members of the public, and then we'll conclude the hearing. Would you like a brief break? Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. We are back on the record with rebuttal.
Thank you. Again, Rich Jovanovich for the record. I'm just going to address some of the math-related things that even lawyers can address, and then I'll have my experts get back up and answer some of the comments made by the public comments specific to water management, environmental, and traffic. The first thing I wanted to address was your initial reaction to, are we going to amend the Kersey-Smoot PUD to reflect the changes? We had extensive conversations with the county attorney's office, and they were comfortable with the fact that there's a DRI monitoring report to properly account for all of the approved dwelling units, and that as each project comes in, there's going to be confirmation with that DRI monitoring report. Should the remaining 25 units in Kersey-Smoot move forward, they'll have to account for the math that way. So there was not a requirement for us to go back and.
What I'm more concerned about is what remains in Kersey-Smoot going to be able to sustain itself with regard to open space, et cetera, to support, the development.
Right, and that analysis was apparently, that county attorney's office became very comfortable with that being available and not requiring us to go back and reallocate each individual PD on that basis. I think their main concern was density, because remember, the master concept plan shows where that limited area of development can occur in Kersey-Smoot. So if they wanted to get outside of the boundary of that original development, they would have to they'd have to come through the process to amend the MCP.
Okay.
So that addressed your, and I'm not saying that I had the same issues when analyzing it as well, and everybody.
I say I agree with it, but if that's what they've said.
Right. So we're there on that issue. I couldn't totally follow the first public speakers on the math, so I just want to reiterate the math again for what exactly we're asking for. We are asking for 488 additional units. Kersey-Smoot currently has 362 units. We were assigned 241 of those. So when you add that to the 488 units we're asking for, that's the 729 in our request. So the net new density is 488 units. There were a whole lot of other numbers being floated around, but that's what we're here talking about from the DRI perspective. There was also a question about, from the public, and then I'm going to bring my experts back up to address the things that require expertise, because some of us in this room have been doing this a long time. I've been doing this for 35 years. Everybody thinks they're an expert in areas like traffic, environmental, and water management. The reality is that you do have to have expertise, and we have experts, and the county has experts. And the county's experts have confirmed everything that our experts have testified to, including traffic. The county's traffic individuals have signed off on the traffic analysis done by Mr. Treesh and the conclusions by Mr. Treesh, but nevertheless, I'm going to bring him back up here to address the public comments. Likewise, environmental looked at water management, also looked at listed species concerns. So I'm going to bring experts up for that. Now, on the question that the realtor asked was, who's going to buy these units? Well, the reality is anybody can buy one of the units. If it's typical of what the market is in this area, they're going to be seasonal residents that buy these units. It's probably not going to be their first home. It's probably not going to be their second home. We anticipate that the people who buy these residences will be seasonal residents that buy these residences, but obviously we can't limit the market who's going to buy those units. But that's what we anticipate the market, to answer his question about who's going to buy the units, but there's no requirement that someone check a box that say they're only going to be reasonable.
To make it age restricted?
This is going to be market rate, top of class residential units, with the anticipation that there's no commitment to age restricted. It could be anybody who wants to buy a unit that can afford to pay the price can buy a unit as long as they can afford to pay the price. With that, I think I'm going to bring up Shane first to talk about the environmental comments. I'm working my way back from the last speaker, and then I'll have Jackie talk about water management, and then finally I'll have Ted address the traffic concerns that were raised.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, it's Shane Johnson, for the record. So in no particular order, here to address some of the environmental concerns raised today. A Corps of Engineers permit was obtained for the project. That did cover the entire project area. And the golf course renovation project that I mentioned earlier, that was kind of the final phase of impacts that that Corps permit authorized. So all of the wetland impacts authorized by the Corps permit have been completed. So when the Corps issues a permit, they require water quality certification from the state, that is the Water Management District. They have to have an ERP in hand, and they incorporate those conditions of that ERP as part of issuance of their permit. So the Corps doesn't regulate stormwater, but the Water Management District does. So they kind of go hand in hand. So the water management issues were handled, essentially all wrapped up by the time the Corps permit was issued. So as part of a Corps permit review, when the Corps receives an application, they do a number of things. They analyze and they take a look at a project to see if there's going to be any potential federal species impacts. That includes panther, that includes wood stork, that includes other federally listed species. So as part of the Corps permit, they consulted with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is the lead wildlife agency at the federal level, with respect to impacts of federal species. That included wood stork. That did not include the Florida panther, and I'll explain why. When the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service receives a request to review from the Corps of Engineers, they look at all the species that could be affected based on not only the site-specific characteristics, but the location of the project. So when it comes to panther specifically, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service takes a look at, is the project located within the panther focus area, okay? It's a geographically defined boundary, and here, the western limit of that boundary is I-75. So this project is nowhere near being located within the Florida panther focus area. So when mitigation is provided for the Florida panther, what you're doing is mitigating for impacts to habitat. That habitat is located within the focus area. Therefore, this project was never an issue with respect to the panther. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, in responding back to the Corps, issued what's called a biological opinion, and it covers the species that were potentially impacted. Again, not including the Florida panther. They provided that information back to the Corps, and again, that was all incorporated into the Corps permit when that was issued. One more aspect on the Corps permit: all of the wetland mitigation for impacts that were authorized by the permit were previously completed. That includes off-site purchase of wetland mitigation credits, and also all of the conservation area that we showed on the maps as part of our presentation. That's already been completed. So essentially, I know our project team has already spoken to this, but this is pretty cut and dry. You've got your conservation areas that are already in place, that have already been maintained and will be maintained in perpetuity, and you've got your development areas. It's pretty cut and dry at this point. With respect to wildlife, specifically the gopher tortoise, the reason I put the map up there with all the burrow locations is to let you know and put on the record that those burrows that were within the development footprint, again related to the golf course renovation project, those have already been addressed through a permit issued by FWC. So there was a number of burrows, yes. We observed physically during our surveys 3 tortoises above the ground. that's not abnormal even in a high-density gopher tortoise population, because gopher tortoises spend most of their time in their burrows. So it's not abnormal to not necessarily see a lot of tortoises walking around, even in a high-density burrow area. So I believe the tortoise issue's been addressed. With respect to invasive species, there are requirements by both the Water Management District permit and the core permit to basically maintain the preserve areas free of exotic vegetation. But with respect to feral hogs and iguanas, there's no local, state, or federal requirement tied to this project to control those species. Lastly, regarding concerns brought up about mangroves, I think Ms. Workman already addressed that in her presentation. We could put up the slide if need be, but that Water Management District conservation area spans pretty much the entire western boundary of the project that's already under conservation easement. And a portion of that contains mangroves. They can't be impacted because they're under conservation easement. So there will be no impacting that area. There will be no relocation of mangroves associated with this project. I think that was it from environmental.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello again, Jackie LaRock for the record. I'm going to talk about a little bit on the surface water management side and a couple of the comments that were made. As far as the flooding comments, the core fundamentals and the math that we do are to prevent off-site impacts. So we contain all of our stormwater runoff, we hold it on site, and then we release it honestly at a much slower rate than what could be there today, because it's very controlled. We're in an impaired water body basin, and so the restrictions on this project are higher than some of the others throughout the county. There are storm surge issues in this area. We're right on the bay. FEMA recently just released new maps where all of the elevations have been raised. So yes, the second gentleman was correct. You do have to bring fill in. You have to meet all of the FEMA requirements. Finished floors have to be base flood elevation plus 1 foot or 2 foot, depending on what kind of funding you get. And so there are rules and requirements in place that the federal government, the state government, and the local government has put in place that we follow. On water management, one thing that I didn't mention is this project does have a CDD on it, so it does have an entity that will own and maintain the water management system in perpetuity. And during the break, Lisa with London Bay was talking with a third gentleman. They actually share the same CDD manager, and the information has been given to the third speaker of, here's our CDD information, please, let's coordinate, let's talk, let's make sure that whatever information we have that's public, you guys have as well. One clarification that I do want to make on irrigation, the Lee Plan consistency states that irrigation shall not be used with potable water. That is the intent of this project. What happens with the location, since we're right on the bay, is we have saltwater intrusion. And so with every project and every DO that we do, we complete a saltwater intrusion study. And that gets submitted, and then at that time, we make that determination with our hydrologist and our experts for groundwater. Can we use the surface water and or a combination of groundwater to irrigate the property, or do we need to do that with potable water? Bonita Springs Utilities already knows this. We have the Bayview residents, and Bonita is using potable. So those steps are made during the development order process, but every step is documented and studied to make sure that we are consistent with the Lee Plan and we're consistent with staff as we go through the steps.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ted Shreesh, TR Transportation. Just a few comments. One, the units from Raptor Bay are included in our analysis. They're part of the overall DRI, so they are embedded within the analysis. One, the roundabout that I spoke of on Coconut Road, that's a Village of Estero project. That's not a Lee County project. Again, Coconut Road, the majority of it is under the Village of Estero jurisdiction, and that project is being done by the Village of Estero. So that's out of our jurisdiction. That's within the Village of Estero. Is there anything else you needed me to cover?
No, I think that answered the question.
I think that's it. Thank you.
Well, the point I think is important for you to make, though, is that the assumptions for trip generation for the DRI as a whole predicted this level of traffic on these roadways. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Because what you're proposing, although there is an alteration of the development parameters, the output in traffic is at or below what has already been approved.
That is correct.
So there's going to be no worsening of traffic than what would have happened under the original development scenario.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I thank you for those additional questions of Ted. We even went further and did the additional analysis just specifically on Coconut Road to hopefully allay some concerns about the public perception that even though the DRI did project traffic through the entirety of the project, we were more focused on that one road to show that what we were always going to put on the traffic, together what was approved in other jurisdictions, still the road was going to function based upon the adopted level of service. So I hope we didn't confuse things by trying to be too specific in addressing what we knew were going to be public comments by factoring in other jurisdictional approvals by Bonita Springs and the village, throwing additional traffic onto Coconut Road. With that, that's our presentation and our rebuttal. I don't know if I'm supposed to do any type of a close at this time where I come
No,
back.
I mean,
up.
it's not necessary. Does staff wish to make any comments?
I have a couple things about interlocal agreement and contacts, like how we contact the public
Okay, sure, come
for one of the
forward.
questions. I just need to put a map up. I just wanted to add some clarity because there was some comments. So we have a DRI application and we have a DCI application. The DRI application, the applicant is required to notice everybody in the DRI. So the applicant notified 4,400 and some people about the application. The DCI is required to notice 500 feet. Within 500 feet of the zoning application, those folks that live in that 500 feet are notified of the rezone. So there's a difference on how this, so a lot of the emails that staff received was about the DRI, and because it's running piggyback with the DCI, they commented on both. As for the Village of Estero, so Lee County unincorporated has interlocal agreements with certain jurisdictions. So you have to remember that this DRI was all in unincorporated Lee County when it first, at its inception. And over time, it's been, portions of it have been annexed, including like the city of Bonita Springs was annexed, and then further annexation happened with the Village of Estero. So everything that you see in this purple color is Village of Estero, and this is the city of Bonita Springs. So unincorporated Lee County has an interlocal agreement with city of Bonita Springs. So when this application came in, staff provided city of Bonita Springs with the review material. This is what they're asking, this is what's going on. When we issued the publication of the staff report, city of Bonita Springs was notified. We do not have an interlocal agreement with Village of Estero. I double checked on the break just to make sure we have it for the roadways and the fire, but we don't have it for zoning cases. However, staff did notice the Village of Estero on the review material. As we were reviewing, we had phone conversations with the Village of Estero as well as City of Bonita Springs. And we also provided the publication of the staff reports on both jurisdictions. So they have the information. And in the packet from public input, you're going to see the Village of Estero emails that came in as this went along in the process. So I just wanted to clarify that because that comes up on zoning cases. So for a zoning case, it's everything within 500 feet is our limitation. So I did get some calls from El Dorado early on in the process, and it was a gentleman who backs up to the golf course, and he just wanted to know what was going on, sent him the master concept plan, showed him what we were doing, and as a result, we got the type B modified 10-foot buffer in there to answer some of his questions about compatibility. So I wanted to kind of shed some light on the separation of those two kinds of cases.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, if there isn't any further testimony, I will conclude this hearing. There's no need to leave the record open for any additional submittals, so I will close the written record as well. I want to thank everyone for their time.
Did you want to do a site visit?
I would like to do a site visit.
So we can get your contact information so you can have.
Yes, please do that. And, because I wasn't really able to access that much when I did my initial drive-by, so.
We'll give you free rein.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you.